Hi, it's Good Friday. God bless. Hope everybody's doing well. I give all my thanks and gratitude to God. And what I want to talk about is a situation I've been just thinking about this. In the world, you'll find, you probably found this. If you haven't, I'm just going to give you my experience. In the world, people sometimes they'll act as if your pain or your struggle isn't as important as their pain, or they'll downplay what you've gone through. And I just want to call that out. I want to call out somebody who confided in me when I was a kid and confided in me about your pain and your struggle. And I listened, and I acted like a sounding board. And I listened to you talk about a violent situation that you experienced. And I listened, and it actually was healing for me, because I realized I'm not the only one who's going through this. You're going through it too. And I had this belief that maybe you could empathize with me because of what you were going through. Maybe you could understand what I'm going through. And there was a couple of family members that did that confided in me quite a bit. I had an aunt that confided in me, and a sister, my stepsister, who confided in me about some things that happened. Yet, when I was going through pain, and I was rightly angry about what happened to me, and I guess I was just looking for something to validate me. And sometimes what you have to do is just validate yourself. But I was only 15 years old, and I was shaky, and I was shaken over this experience of my father knocking me to the ground. I was walking down the grass to see him, because he was picking me up. And he's a big guy. He's about 6'4", 6'5". So he's way bigger than me at the time, and he took his hand and he just knocked me right off my feet. And I landed on the grass, which was humiliating because it was in public too, and everybody could see. I had my other sister was in the front seat, and my stepmother and my father got in the driver's seat, and I was in the back seat. Then he turned around in the car and started hitting me when I'm in the back seat, and I'm cornered. I've got nowhere to go, and I'm being hit. And what I found so disturbing is that he felt so comfortable laying his hands on me. He felt so comfortable hitting me, And what I found so disturbing about that is that he'd often tell me that he had such a low tolerance for pain. He made a point of telling me that. And before he started to attack me, the most basic, I would call it, the most horrific attack, he was actually asking me what my pain tolerance was. And I didn't know what he was talking about. And he said, "So what's your pain tolerance?" And I looked at him and he goes, "My pain tolerance is really low." And he said that my stepmother's pain tolerance is really high. And he goes, "What's your pain tolerance?" I just looked at him. I didn't even answer. I just didn't know what he was talking about. I was 15. I didn't say anything. And he just looked at me. And then I get this thing where I get knocked to the ground. And I'm in the car, and he's hitting me. Now there's no reason to do that. I don't care what I might have done. I was seeing a boy he didn't like. That isn't the way to handle it. And people might use that as an excuse. They might say, "Oh, well, he was just trying to protect you." And no. Because this sort of violence was happening to me ever since I can remember, ever since I was a kid, ever since I was a little kid, 5 years old. So there's no excuse. That's just, there's no excuse to put your hands on somebody like that. And an abusive person will always come up with an excuse for why they're doing it. Oh, it's because of this. Oh, it's because of that. Oh, it's because I'm stressed. No, it's unacceptable. And I was watching The Sopranos, and as terrible as Tony Soprano could be, he never laid his hands on Meadow. You know, he loomed at her, he'd be angry at her, but he didn't just backhand her, you know, not kick her to the ground. And he was a mobster. He was like the mob boss who did some pretty scary things, you know, but even he wouldn't sink that low as to just, you know, hit and disrespect. And the reason it hurt so much, so on so many levels, is it was such a disrespect of my body, disrespect of me, that he could just treat me this way. But when I went and spoke to some family member about this, and I was, you know, rightly angry about it, she looked at me with this expression on her face and said, "We went through it, and now you have to go through it." And I no compassion in that instant. And I just felt so alone, you know, I felt so, and I didn't accept it. I said, no, this is not something that I should have to accept. And also I thought to myself, really? You went through it? Your dad knocked you to the ground and hit you? Your dad was constantly laying his hands on you and hitting you? Because you never told me that story. You told me a story about how your mother hit you. But you never told me a story about how a 6'5" guy used all his bulk and knocked you to the ground, if that happened. Because, so it's not even, it's a false equivalence, you know, because her mother was hitting me too. So I was getting it from her mother already, and I was getting it from my father. So how is that equal? Now, if that wasn't bad enough, I didn't even see that boy anymore. You know, we broke up. And I was working part-time at a restaurant. And I went out with my friend. We went out to dinner. And it was such a good evening. And she was really positive. And I did everything right. I called my dad. I said, I'm with my friend. I'll be home by my curfew at 11. Everything went good. I came home by 11 for my curfew. I was downstairs washing dishes because we had a little kitchen suite downstairs, and that's where I had to make my own food, right? I wasn't allowed to eat upstairs with the rest of the family. And I was by the sink, just washing the dishes. And my dad came up to me, and he was like, he's a huge guy, right? And he said, "You were seeing that boy again, weren't you?" And I said, "No," you know, because I wasn't. And I have Asperger's, you know, in that I can be very defiant if I'm telling the truth, especially if I'm telling the truth, right? I'm like, "No, I didn't. I was with my friend. I told you, I called you, I let you know. I'm home by my curfew. What's the problem, right?" And looking at it now, I could see that he was trying to goad me into being disrespectful. You know, like I feel like I was being provoked. So I said to him, "I don't care if you believe me or not," right? And I'm still doing the dishes, and he's kind of, you know, looking at me, and he's really looking down at me. And it was a Saturday. And I don't know, it was about, it was like maybe 11:30 by the time, you know, because I was doing the dishes, so it was about that time. And he said, like I said, "I don't care if you believe me or not." And he snaps, he lunges at me, he picks me up off the ground by my shirt. He picks me up and he slams my head into the back of a cupboard, cutting the back of my head, okay? And then he picks me up and he drags me to another room. There was this spare room where my stepbrother used to live, and there was a spare bed in there. And he's dragging me to this room. He forces me onto the twin bed. He physically gets on top of me on this bed. He takes his legs and he pins my arms and my legs together so I cannot move. So I'm basically paralyzed. The only thing I can move is my head. And he's straddling me and he's looking down at me. Then he takes his big, huge frickin' paw hands and is using both his hands. And he starts to slap me in the face again and again and again and again and again. And I'm screaming. And I don't know what's going on. And I'm saying, stop, stop. And he's not stopping. And he's saying under his breath, cry bitch. Now to me, that is not normal. That is out of line. That is not proportional to me giving him a smart answer. Okay? And he kept doing this again and again and again and again. Then he stopped to give himself a breather. And by that point, I peed my pants. And I'm sitting on the edge of his bed, and he has this chair that he's sitting on, and he's sitting across from me. And he's staring at me, and the look on his face is pure hatred, okay? And he's looking at me with this look, like that. And I'm sitting there, and I'm shaking, okay? And I start to breathe a little bit, and he goes, stop breathing like that. You're irritating me. You're faking it. Stop breathing that way. So I'm trying to control my breathing as I'm sitting there. Then he takes his big fist and he starts to punch me in the shoulder. And for every single transgression I've ever made in my life, he's punching me in the shoulder for everything I ever did. And then he goes, you know what? I didn't like the way you waved that smoke away when we were in the car, because he had a part-time janitor job, and I would help him after school, on a regular basis all summer. And I'd be sitting in the front seat, and he'd be smoking, and I'd go like that to wave the smoke away, because it hurt me. It hurt my sinuses. I didn't like it. So I didn't make any bones about it, okay? I didn't like it. And he goes, I don't like the way that you waved that smoke away in the car. How many months ago was that? Like 5 months ago. Bang! Smashes me in the shoulder with his fist. And I didn't like, and your friend April said that I had big feet, and she made fun of my shoes, and I didn't like that. Bang! Right in the shoulder, again. And so he's basically using me as a punching bag at this point, okay? I'm a 15-year-old girl. Then he goes, what did you learn? And I said, I didn't learn a damn thing. I learned that you're a tyrant. That's what I learned. And he says to me, you didn't learn anything. And he takes me and he forces me on that bed again. He gets on top of me again, and he does the same damn thing again. And he starts to hit me again in the face, and then he stops again. And now, by this time my face is all beat up, and my mouth is busted, my eye is all bruised, my whole face has been beat up, right, by this time. He makes me sit on his knee, and he says, hug me. I said, no, I'm not hugging you. He says, hug me. I said, no, I'm not doing it. And at that point, my stepmother saved me. My stepmother saved me because she knocked on the door and she said, that's enough. So this tiny little lady, this tiny little woman. And because of her, I don't mean to cry, sorry. I got out of that damn room. Okay. And I'm sharing this story because I'll always be grateful that she did that. She was probably scared. I mean, she could see this wasn't going well, right? He probably was gonna kill me, And for anybody that says to me, okay, things happen. You just got to take it. We all, no, that was unacceptable. And if I walk away, if I had to go no contact after that because I could not reconcile that situation, if that's the word, with, I couldn't come to terms with that. I couldn't just go back to being normal. I was 15, 16, that situation took me out of a home. I was put into a foster home after that, okay? And he ran around told everybody that he only hit me once, which was an absolute lie. There's witnesses that he did it, but they'll never stand up for me. I've asked, are you going to ever speak up for me? You were there. You saw what happened. I have a sister who saw everything. She saw my face. She saw me all beat up. But, people sometimes are scared to speak up against violence, right? And I'll put a warning on this video, so if you don't listen to it, it's too traumatic, right? I'm sure you guys have all gone through things too, probably similar things. And I understand. And nobody has a right to tell you that it's no big deal, or, get over yourself, or, when you have lemons, make lemonade. You can't just jump to that step, okay? And sometimes I don't want to make lemonade at all. Maybe I want to make orange juice. Okay? But it is true. You have to forgive. You have to ask God, because, how demented was that person to do that, right? To do that to somebody. But that doesn't mean I have to hang out with them. That doesn't mean that I have to interact with them so they can do it some more, right? Sometimes people, they go crazy. They get into these really bad situations. And the best thing you can do is stay out of their company and not let them use you as a punching bag anymore. Because it's unacceptable. So, if for some people it becomes like a bad habit, right? That's what scapegoating is. You look at one person and that person becomes a person that they kick. And I've done some research on that. And some people, they like that because they get a dopamine rush, or they get a sense of calm and peace after they do it. And that becomes their addiction. It's like a drug. And I won't put up with it anymore. The last time I saw him was in my 20s. And he invited me for Christmas dinner. And he was like, I found God, I found religion. I'm changed, being wanting to be a forgiving person. And he invited me for Christmas. Okay, this is like a horror movie, right? He invited me for Christmas dinner. And I went because he was showing that he was, changed, and that he had found God. I get there on Christmas thinking I'm going to have Christmas dinner. A holy day, right? There's no dinner. There's a few buns on a plate that are covered in this yucky powder. He's sitting in a chair, miserable. Still a big, intimidating guy. Sitting there. Going, okay. He has women mud wrestling on the television. I say, Dad, could you turn that off? He doesn't turn it off. Dad, could you turn off the mud wrestling? I had to ask 3 times. Then he turns it off. Okay, that's humiliation. Why are you showing this to me? Why do you feel that it's okay to have this on the television when I show up? That's basically saying, you're nothing to me. You're so low. But you know what? When somebody treats you with disrespect and makes you feel that you're nothing, that doesn't mean you're nothing. Just because somebody treats you with disrespect doesn't mean that you aren't worthy of respect. That's on him. That's his behavior. But there was no, and then I had a gift, and I gave him a gift. There was no gift for me. And he was just being miserable. And then he picked up this letter opener, this really sharp letter opener. And as he's talking to me, he's jabbing it at me. And he didn't cut me with it, but he's jabbing it at me, going like that as he's talking to me. And I got the hell out of there. And I thought, that's it. I'm done. I'm never putting myself in that situation again. And it's been very painful because I couldn't go to certain events. I couldn't go to funerals. I couldn't go to weddings because he was going to be there. And for my own self-worth and for my own health, I can't put myself in that situation. Everybody's got their own stories. I'm sure they have their stories too, but this is my story. And I did confront him with that, what happened at Christmas. And his response was, I have no memory of that event. Okay, if you say you have no memory of an event, what that means is it's a get out of jail free card. It means they're saying they can do whatever the hell they want, and they'll just rewrite history, and they'll just say, oh, that didn't happen. So, right. It's just shocking, because in my opinion, I have been the scapegoat. And then I have a sister that was saying things to me about me, I won't say who it is, that are slandering me. So I become the person that's bad. You're slandering me like I was the punching bag of the family, in my opinion. So can't say, you don't want to say, don't hold him accountable. Okay, to say it's about, I'm the bad person, because that's easier. It's easier. I want to be strong. I want to be focused on having a forgiving heart, but that doesn't mean forget. I focus on doing my piano and going for walks and meditation and strength. But, healing doesn't mean that you just forget. And healing doesn't mean that you don't honor that person that was beat up in a room. But anyway, you probably have your stories too, and I hope you honor yourself too. Okay, God bless.